introduce my friend and guest, Tarun Rana. Tarun, say hi.
How you doing?
So Tarun, can you describe to us the kind of legal practice that you have?
Sure, Gary, and thanks again for having me on here. I'm looking forward to this. I have a similar practice as you. I do mainly personal injury and work comp. For the most part, I've been focusing more of my work on trial work because, much like you, I found a knack for it and I enjoy it, and I enjoy being in front of people. So a lot more trial work has been the emphasis, but unfortunately with COVID, that's been a little bit tougher to do. But hopefully in this next year, we'll be able to get back into trial.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of success at that. I know you were. One of the things I've seen you do, and just for the listeners, Tarun and I kind of just. How did we meet originally? Do you remember? I don't know.
I think just in the community, both of us do the same thing, and you were kind enough to, as I don't want to call you an old man, but as a nice wizened figure, you took me.
You see the gray hair in my beard right now.
Hey, I got it too. As a very nice gentleman, you kind of took me under your wing and offered free advice, which was very much appreciated. Any young lawyer needs mentors such as you who are willing to share their info.
Well, and yeah, it was good to meet you and good to do it. And then your neighbor works with my wife, so we've had dinner a couple times with them, and they're great people. And then we just basically have lunch and just. But one of the things that I did when I was younger that I've seen you do very successfully is you haven't sat around and just expected business and trial skill to come to you. I've really seen you hit it hard and really try to teach yourself some of these trial tactics that we do. And one of the things I talk about to clients and on my website is how lawyers like us hone our talents. So here's my question, and we're going to get some more questions up on our feed, but let me just start it off. Is when you graduate from law school, do you walk out being a great trial lawyer, or what have you done to become a good trial lawyer?
Good question. So unfortunately, law school is great at giving us the tools that we can put into our belt, but very little practical experience. So a lot of that was just, going out there and getting it myself. I remember I lost my first trial. I'll never forget it. And I'm sure it won't be the last loss that I have, but I learned more from that loss than I did probably in all of law school. Not to say that I didn't learn many valuable things. It teaches you to critically think, how to read opinions, but really all the experience came hands-on. And then I've been very fortunate. I've been involved in a lot of trial groups, one of which is an outfit out of Atlanta that you and I do some work for. They brought me on as an instructor, which is great because you really get to see how you get to see some of the best trial lawyers doing their work and then getting that information. So really just learning, constantly spending this COVID period watching CLEs. You put on some great ones as well. I've seen some of yours. And so learning always, but then also doing the practical aspect of going into trial.
One of the, those are all great points, and you've done it. You've really worked on it. You've had some good results, which is great. I've tried a lot of cases too, but even having done this for, I think it's 28 or 29 years, I am always still relearning, reworking on something. We're on the same listservs. I was reading one yesterday about an opinion that came down on voir dire. If you saw that one, that was completely BS. One of the tricks that I learned, and so in that case, a lawyer who was picking a jury missed some questions that he should have asked, and the judge made some incorrect rulings on bias on a jury. And one of the things that I hate in voir dire, and what voir dire for the viewers is when you're picking a jury. And I know I'm just jumping into this topic, but this is interesting to me. So what we do as lawyers is we ask all these questions and do all this, and people come in and they end up, if they trust you in voir dire, they end up being honest with you and telling you, I had a personal injury case, or maybe I don't believe in that, and then we do all this work and they admit their biases, they admit their prejudices, and then you say, well, maybe you're not the best fit for this kind of a case, and they say, maybe I'm not, and then you spend all this time doing this. The defense lawyer gets up and says, can you be fair and can you follow the judge's rule? Yes, I can. And the judge says, oh, they're in. And that's not the law. So when I go into trial, I have a I file a jury selection brief, which you probably do the same thing. And then the other thing is that jury selection statute. So when I try a case, I have my voir dire, I have my list of questions, and then I have those. And from that same group out of Atlanta, I have my key questions. When I get somebody, how do I do? What do I do to nail down that opinion? I say, you've had this opinion for a long time. You believe in this. You would say it if you didn't. A lawyer like me is not going to change your mind between now and on Thursday when you're still going to have that. And yes, I am. But the second piece of paper I have is the Missouri statute. And I have it printed off, and I walk it up to the judge and I say, Judge, if you already have a bias or an opinion on this, you're not qualified to be a jury in the wisdom of the legislature of the state of Missouri. So, and I know I've been talking for a minute. Your thoughts, sir?
Absolutely. I agree. I do the exact same stuff you mentioned. You got to file that brief ahead of time. And it's, mine is 8 pages. I know the judge isn't reading it because he's thinking I already know all this stuff. And then yet they all still tend to do exactly what you said, which is, well, they said they could be unbiased. Well, of course they're going to say they're going to be unbiased. Nobody wants to think that they are in fact biased. And then having that statute ready and then just making your record. I mean, the opinion that you mentioned, unfortunately it was one of those situations where I don't think the attorney squeezed the orange enough. And if you really had kind of pushed a little bit further, maybe, hopefully it would have been enough. But, I think the follow-ups, tell me more about that. That's one of the most important things we learned, because as you and I are very, are basically displaying right now, we both like to talk a lot. And one of the best things about jury selection is you got to let them talk. And so if you can get them to talk and just using things like, tell me more, it really gets them to kind of hopefully give them enough rope to eventually get them out.
The two areas where lawyers need to learn to listen rather than talk are in voir dire, listening. You have a list of questions and you're so worried about missing one. You're not listening to that juror telling you that, wait a minute, did you just hear? They just said they can't work, they can't be fair and impartial in your case, or this is not the right case for them. The other time is in cross-examination of witnesses. Too many times I see young puppy lawyers, as one of our mentors calls us when we're young, sit and go through their list of questions rather than listening to that answer, because my best crosses in hindsight come when I'm just sitting there relaxed, listening to what they say. And I say, well, wait a minute. You just said this. Where are we going with this? What's the logical conclusion of this? Are you calling my client a liar? Are you really saying they weren't injured? Here's the picture of the property damage. Are you really saying this was a low impact collision? Are you kidding me? So listening is something we got to relearn ourselves, I think, after law school.
Agree. I mean, that's, I'll admit, I mean, with directs, I've been bad about it in the past, and that is something I've really strived to do in the last couple of years, is get away from my outline, because that there's comfort in an outline, in a plan, but sometimes you have to deviate from the plan. And if you have a good defense attorney on the other side, you do a podcast with Debbie Champion. She's one of the best. And if you have a good one, she's going to throw off your game potentially and have that witness prepared to go a different route. And if you don't follow that thread, sometimes you're going to miss really important stuff that they accidentally may have told you that they weren't planning on telling you because you're too busy sticking to your script.
It's so true. When I direct someone, I walk around a lot. I try to stand behind the jury box, and I walk around and I don't look at my notes. And I also have my bullet points. Have I talked about the incident enough? Have I talked about how they felt, this and stuff? And then, and the jury, you don't have to be perfect in front of a jury. You can have warts. We all make mistakes, and juries see us as real people when we do. So I'll get a roll, I'll get it going. I'll go for a while, and then I'll go back and I'll take a minute, look at them, and it's, oh, you know what? I forgot to talk to you about your wage loss claim. Let me talk to you about that. Let me ask you this, Tarun, in terms of how you try cases, and not to give away all your tricks, because we want to share, but we want to keep something. Just like Debbie, I always joke with Debbie Champion. I'm like, yeah, Debbie, you're not this nice person. You stick the knife in smoother than anybody else. She is a tough lawyer.
But she is so nice while she's doing it.
Oh, you don't even know. You turn and go, I think I just got screwed. What's some of your like big picture takeaways about how you try cases different than maybe a few years ago in terms of you keep continuing to hone your legal trial skills?
Good question. So there's been on the front and back end have been the two big noticeable differences because, a lot of times people will say by your opening, most jurors have made up their mind, and there's studies that have been done and they basically show that most people are going to still side the way that they originally sided when they first made their impression of the case. So my opening, I started using a PowerPoint. I know that's controversial for some lawyers, and I know the defense usually gets mad at me, but I found that I look more organized and I take the role of teacher and less so the advocate, which then makes it a little bit friendlier for the jury because I really am just trying to inform them about the facts of the case in a fairly neutral way. Now, obviously, it's going to be slightly biased towards my side, but
slightly.
But I try to eliminate it, to be honest, because then it gives me more credibility in front of them. And then they really do. I give them everything, the warts and all. And one of the major areas with their doctors. So a lot of times the plaintiff side has the treating doctor, and this is a Mitnick thing that I'm sure you know about. He's a big fan of letting the chips fall where they may, with the doctor. And he says, look, who are you going to believe? The doctor who, doesn't testify for a living and was the treater in this case, who laid their hands on the plaintiff, the injured person, or the hired gun who gets paid and who does this all the time, the treating doctor might have testimony that's maybe bad for me. And I embrace that. I embrace all the bad facts and I get them all out. So that's been the number one thing is really laying up a good PowerPoint with the good, the bad, the ugly right out the gate. That way I gain credibility, but also let them know the version of the facts that maybe skewed a little bit more my way, but still somewhat neutral. And then on the back end,
can I interrupt you before? Let's do the back end in a minute. Let me add something to that. When I first started trying cases, I wanted to win my case in my opening statement. The more I do it, the more I underpromise and overperform. So in my opening, I want to underpromise because while this evidence, no one likes to be told what to do. People want to reach their conclusions, and the jury should and deserves to be respected and reach their own conclusions. It may not be always your way, but you know what? They get it right most of the time. So the more I do it, and it's not that I'm not going to try to do a great opening statement. I do, but I want the jury, like the second and the third day, to be sitting there going, wow, that testimony was actually better than what he said the day before. You know what? I know he said it was a hard impact, but Lord, look at those pictures. How could that defense lawyer have said that? Or, so that way, that by the time you're at the end and you're closing the deal down and closing the gap at the end, you have a lot of credibility because they'll look at you and say, you did not exaggerate. You proved what you said you were going to prove, and then some. You actually did it more than I expected. And you're not one of those politicians that overpromises and underperforms. You're doing the opposite. So then I interrupted you before. What were you going to say about the end of a trial in terms of a big picture way you do things different?
So, and this directly goes to that course that I teach with the trial group that you and I are both a part of, and
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly right. So I started doing for the damages portion. I focus grouped this portion quite extensively, and I found that it really truly was. It had a lot of legs to it. And I started giving people reasons for the verdict, because the number one thing that we get in jury selection, and I know you've heard it 1,000 times, is, well, I don't know how I can quantify the damages in this case for your client. And of course, we've been taught to say, well, don't worry about that right now. During jury selection, I will teach you how to do that. And I almost felt like a faker because I never actually taught them how to do it. And then once I figured out, actually, you got to give them reasons. And so I started doing, 5 reasons for $50,000 or, whatever. And I started giving people reasons. And then each of those reasons has to be powerful by themselves. But then it gives them room to then say, well, if I don't like that reason as much, I'm going to give less weight to it and less money for it. But I like that one more, this other one more, and I'm going to give more money to that because it has more weight with me. And I saw an uptick in how much jurors and potential jurors doing focus groups were willing to give based on that new change.
Do you do that? So what I do sometimes is how bad, how long, and how interfering on pain and suffering. So talking about different, how do you as another way to teach them is, well, if you have a certain, because the medical bills are what they are, the wage loss is what they are, but if you have pain and suffering, how do you quantify that, which is always the rub. So one of the techniques I like is how bad was the pain, how long did it last, how interfering. And so you could have really bad pain, but if it only lasts a minute. But on the other hand, if you have a lower level of pain, but it's there for your whole life. So anyway, do you use that at all or no?
So that
is that a secondary to the reasons?
That to me is secondary, because that is a David Ball technique that I adore him. He's fantastic. I bought the very expensive book, and I just felt that it wasn't resonating as much. And so I've used that at times, but I typically do not use that method as much, just because. Yeah, for me, it wasn't hitting it wasn't hitting the marks that I was trying to hit. And, admittedly, we haven't had as many trials over the last year unfortunately, because of COVID. So I haven't been able to test out as much other than in focus groups. But that is something I would like to put back in, because it just depends on the type of case you have. But for right now, I've been mainly sticking with the reasons for the verdict, and it's been doing me pretty well so far.
I do the same. I do the reasons as well. They need, and then you also, the other way we do it, the other thing we do is we want to arm the jurors a little bit when you're talking about that. So if someone says $50,000 is a lot of money, you say, yeah, but he's missing his leg. Or, you want to provide the jurors the assistance. So that's another technique. We started off with some questions. We've jumped right into trial skills because you and I do a lot of trial work, and I don't talk as much about trial skills in some of these podcasts because it gets a little, unless you've done it and been it, it's a little bit, it's hard to connect with it, and sometimes. But let me do this. Let me move to some questions I'm seeing in our feed here. So here's a question for you, and you go first on this one, please, Tarun. When you're in a courtroom, do you know who the excellent lawyers are? And if you're up against one, how do you prepare differently versus if you're up against an amateur?
I mean, I do, and I know you do as well. Typically, because we've been around the block. I mean, obviously you've been around a little bit longer, but you know who the good ones are, and you know which attorneys are going to be lazy and really aren't going to be prepared, and which ones you better have all your your goods ready to go. And so I do prepare more. I've actually found that Zoom allows me to cheat a little bit more, because then I can have two screens up and I can have my notes on one side and I can talk as if it's all coming from rote memory, and I look.
You're not going like this?
Yes, exactly. So I look brilliant when in reality I'm cheating. So on those, I am going to prepare a lot more. It's just, you have to, because you don't want to lose. I mean, we are competitive people, but we also have clients that we want to represent very well. And if I go in underprepared, whether it's an amateur or a pro, it's not good either way. So really the focus, I think, has to be prepare either way, but more so when you know that the person on the other end is very good.
Yeah, let me add to that. That's very true. And going against a good lawyer raises the game. It raises, both of you perform better. I've had many trials where at the end of the trial, and this is patting myself a little bit on the back, but it's true, where the judge will turn to the jury and say, folks, you may not realize it because you don't do this all the time like I do it, but you just had two really good lawyers treat each other fair, but do really good for their clients. So hats off to both sides. And I've had, at most trials, the judges do that. And the judges also want to both sides compliment lawyers who they know who work hard on their craft and have worked hard. And so, and they appreciate that, because not everybody does. All right. And you and I, it's funny, with the level of cases and the level of litigation we do, we kind of get used to being against good people. But you got to remember, there's a whole universe of people that aren't working their rears off like you and I are. Because I know we spend a lot of time on just working on our craft, getting the best cross that we can do, or the best opening and that kind of stuff. And we're kind of geeks. We can get in the weeds on that. So let me add another corollary to that, though. So the other interesting thing, though, is sometimes if you're up against not as good of a lawyer, they can have the Columbo effect on you, which is that old. So if you have kind of a lawyer and there are some lawyers that do this on purpose. They're, where are my notes? Or I don't know quite what I'm going to ask you. Or they act like they don't got their act together when they're wicked smart and that's their act. But I've had times where I've had to sit back and I say, man, you're whooping this guy. Every objection sustained, you're shutting him down. The jury's not going to like it because they think you're just whooping them and it's too unfair. So sometimes I got to sit down and shut up, which is hard to do when you're drinking the water in trial.
Absolutely. And so let me ask you a question. Do you object a lot at trial?
So should I talk about this or should I give you the secret or no? Or should I? So there's a great lawyer out of where's Johnson from? Is he from Tennessee or Kentucky when he started this?
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah. So he doesn't object. Tarun's asking a great question. Here's why it's a great question is when we're in law school, we take evidence and we learn on the objections, and you learn which one to stand up and do, and then you're in the heat of the battle and you got to get it right and you want to object and blah blah blah. And that guy's saying hearsay or he didn't have that document authenticated or blah. There's all kinds of shit we can catch the other side not getting it right on. However, do you want to do that? Because what a jury sees is you're hiding the ball. Why, Mr. Berger, Mr. Rana, why are you trying to keep us from hearing this? Why don't you let it happen? So I have trials now where I don't, and I literally don't. In fact, I've just done it where miraculously, I tried a case with another lawyer. I lost the case. And you talked about at the beginning of this is that, I mean, I can't tell you all my wins, but I can tell you all my losses.
Oh yeah.
And it was in the second week of trial when it was the first time when I stood up and objected. And the jury was like, whoa, there you go. So I don't object a lot and I let them go. And then you know what? And then if the other lawyer, if they're a good lawyer, they let you do it too. And you can ask them questions to get through the easy stuff. And then when the material stuff happens, I've also tried a case. One of the last trade cases I tried, it was in 18. So it wasn't last year, none this year, but anyway, the amount of objections and trying to shut out evidence by the defense in that case was so palpable that I wasn't watching, but some of the people who were watching the jurors, we noticed the jurors who were rolling their eyes when the other side. So I had I give all my exhibits to the other side when I start. Here's all my exhibits. I'm using the whole thing, but I literally had the other lawyer crossing my client with an exhibit they would not give to me. And I just let it happen because they looked like the biggest bunch of jerks and it wasn't going to hurt us that bad anyway. We won the case. But so let me ask you this. This is the last Ask a Lawyer show I'm doing this year. We're turning to 2021. What do you see? There was a question about this. Let me find it. I can't find it. What do you think? What is 2021 going to look like for trial lawyers like us, Tarun?
Specifically, our injury work, I unfortunately anticipate a bigger fight in the legislature on tort reform type bills. I think COVID actually may have done us one of the only or few good things of COVID was it actually prevented the legislature from making a bunch of tort reform bills that really didn't get too far in their sessions. I think that's going to be a fight that they're going to be fighting pretty hard. You and I are fairly active on that front, unfortunately, because we have to, because we're kind of the people that nobody wants to call us and nobody likes us until they need us. And then you realize how valuable we are. And unfortunately, you have to go through it before you kind of gain your appreciation of people like you and I.
Well, the other thing is, and I know I'm interrupting you, I'll let you continue, but there's no clear identifiable group of the future injured. We know who the Chamber of Commerce is. We know who the insurance lobbyists are. We know who the people are who are fighting tort reform, which is crazy. Why would you want to prevent Missourians from getting fair compensation at the expense of out-of-state insurance companies? It's crazy. So there's no group of future injured. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and you're absolutely right. And the other thing is, if you're not part of that future injured class, which because you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know that this stuff is so harmful now. And so, I think one of the best examples was that legislator out of Kansas who's unfortunately his son passed away in a really bad water slide incident. And he ended up being limited by some of the tort reform that he passed in his own state. And there was a workaround because there was a very, very brilliant lawyer out of Texas who was able to make that case work for him and get more than what he ought to have received as damages for what he went through. But again, it's
based on tort reform, not based on the injury.
Right. And it's not about the money, but if you're somebody who's injured and relies on the money in the future or may need future care or what have you, for that person to hear that you might be limited in what you can recover can be really demoralizing.
Who does the public think is going to support the guy who's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life or has chronic pain? I mean, we're all supporting that with our tax money. Why not make and we got to remember when we're asking someone to pay that money, we're only asking the companies and individuals who systemically decide to go out and break the safety rules that are all here to help us and protect us. These people decide to do that. They know they're doing it. They take the risk. They push the accelerator down to go 100 miles an hour. Their insurance company ought to face the consequences of that. It should not be borne by the poor family that is rear-ended. And we can give you a million examples. So that is one. Let me tell you, in 2021, so we're going to hit a lot of tort reform, and Missouri is a very red state, so it's going to go through. I'm going to be down there lobbying against it.
Good.
Yeah, I do that every year.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I know you do. And I know you do your stuff too. So what about going back to, when are we going to have jury trials? We're going to have jury trials in June, you think? You're going to have them in the fall? When do you think? I think we're going to start hitting civil jury trials in September, October.
I'm being a little more wishful thinking, but I'm hoping summer. I think, as far as vaccines right now, unfortunately, the rollout has been a little bit slower than the experts wanted. But I think with more vaccines entering the mix, more people are saying that they want to get it. I think, everybody just wants a return to normalcy. I think if you kind of look at your January, February of this year, I mean, imagine all the things you were doing. And if you were told, hey, you're going to be limited from doing a lot of things for the next 10 months, I mean, imagine all the things you would have done. I think that's a big motivator for many people. So I think a lot of people will be widely vaccinated or achieve this herd immunity that they want us to achieve. I'm hoping by summer. Unfortunately, I'm in the young, healthy category, so I'm like bottom of the barrel in terms of getting the vaccine, and I'm hearing summer for me. So, it takes a little bit of time to get used to it, and then hopefully we can.
Wait a minute, but your name's Tarun Rana. I mean, don't you think just because of that? Well, no, we'll have a new president, so they're not going to discriminate against people like you as much as they would want to.
That's right. I wish I could just name drop and get to the front of the line, but I know there's much more deserving people, and I've been fortunate. I have a job where I can work remotely, so can you. I mean, so
you like my office, my fancy office? Look at that. There's my giraffe. This is my high-end office here.
That's your consultant.
Right.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is right now I'd be sitting at home too, but I check the mail. I have to come in once a day to check the mail, and I figured it'd be easier to do it from here. Otherwise, you'd be seeing the animals running across the screen wanting to get a feeding from me. So around this time is when it's brutal in my household. The cat wants to be fed, and she's meowing like crazy.
Before I did this, I had my poor little kid, my poor little William, my 2.5-year-old. He didn't really take a nap. He was sitting in my lap, and I was like, "Oh my God, I forgot I had this." And I'm jumping up. You could see my fancy. Anyway, and and the poor kid. I think he's probably still. I'm gonna go play with him here in like a half hour or so. But it's all good. It's the silver lining. Let me ask you this question: what's the silver lining in your life of now? Let me say this. The pandemic's terrible. My parents currently have it. The stories I have read about the deaths make me cry. It's terrible. It changed our lives. I don't want to minimize it.
Mhm.
But I also like in my life to focus on gratitude and other stuff, because we sit and look at the glass half empty all the time. It's just not a way to be. So my question out of the random to you is, what's your silver lining about the pandemic?
For me, it was the ability to spend time with my family in really working on my client files. We spend a lot of time running around. Unfortunately, we're both successful and busy attorneys. And so we don't really get to stop and smell the roses, at least as much as you and I probably wish we ought to be able to. I'm sure having Liam in your life has probably helped you ground you a little bit more, because otherwise you'd be running, 1,000 miles a minute. But, getting to see my family more frequently, being home and being able to see them most of the day has been incredible. And then being able to work on client files that, unfortunately we get busy, and some people just sit there. And so being able to really look at every file and work on a truly deep level without having to worry about running to court and spending 2 hours waiting for the judge to get out, and then, waiting for other arguments. It's been nice not having to worry
Driving and parking and.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I had a hearing at 9 o'clock. I jumped on at 8:59, and I was one of the first ones called. I was done by 9:07, so grand total of 8 minutes was spent. When in the past it would have been, a good hour and a half round trip, and sitting there and going through security. So that's been nice. But like you said, I mean, you and I have been very fortunate. There's plenty of suffering that is going on. Our businesses were not that impacted by COVID. I mean, there's certainly plenty of places that shut down or weren't able to make a living, and even now we're depending on Congress to get through this spending bill so that they can get some money for rent relief and just bills. But you and I are fortunate that we don't have to deal with that, because our jobs can be remote. So the silver lining is really seeing that our jobs are recession proof as well.
Yeah, I've had the same thing. My business was well set up for the recession. I didn't really know it, but it is, and we've done a lot of work to keep it going. I've had I've really learned some lessons about communication this year and how much we have to work at it with me and my staff. But my silver lining is the same: being able to be home, see my family more, do that kind of stuff has been great. And you know what? They're still all here. I got almost all my family are downstairs right now. So let's move on to some questions. Let's move on, because it is Ask a Lawyer, and I think we already answered this one about what do we see in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
What laws or issues you'd like to see changed or addressed in 2021? Just to recap, is I think Tarun and I both see attempts at tort reform that we would oppose. People, and just to add one more point to that, everybody knows what the First Amendment is, and there's all kinds of people that fight for the First Amendment. Everybody knows what the Second Amendment is. Everybody fights for the right to keep and bear arms, and you can't even get close to constraining that. But what people forget is that you also have the Seventh Amendment, the right to a jury trial to address your grievances. And when tort reform happens, they're taking power away from the jury. They're taking that away. So are you going to not be allowed to say what you want to say on Facebook? Well, you have a First Amendment right to do that. However, you also have a Seventh Amendment right to have your issues addressed by a jury of your peers, a fair jury. So there's my soapbox. Let me ask you this, Tarun. I have another question for you. I like this question. I liked a lot of the question. Tarun, what are the biggest challenges of running your own practice? How does practicing law or being a lawyer help or hinder you as a business owner?
That is a great question, because I think one of the biggest challenges of running a business in general is that you're truly never off, or most of the time never off, unless you're very good at building out a system for your absence. And you are very good at doing that. I am decent in getting better every day, but recognizing that a law practice is different, because you have the practice of law, which is separate from running the business. And you and I have talked about this, and that's the struggle. Is a lot of people that we know are good at one or the other, but not both. And I think you very, very festive. Both.
Look at that. There's a guy. Sorry, I am listening to you. This is a good answer,
like
but
that.
I'm like, whoa. Sorry, go ahead.
So I think being able to do both those is very difficult. And we see a lot of businesses fail, and we see a lot of law firms, not a lot, but some of them fail because they're not able to really do a good job at the business side of it. So being able to juggle both of those is tough. But it is something that you and I have learned to do fairly well, I believe. And in terms of, I guess, other challenges is just recognizing that you've set up a good system and have good employees such that you are not actually as needed as you think you're needed. This time of year, I'm usually taking my one vacation out of the country that I take.
Mexico.
To Mexico, somewhere warm. And I didn't
No, I
take
know
that.
you've done that for years. It's something you look forward to every year.
I love it. It's fantastic. But I didn't do it this year because of COVID. But one of the things that I learned very quickly is how, while I'm very important to the COG, life can go on without me for a week. So being able to get away and really unwind is so important, because unfortunately in our profession, burnout is a very real thing. And, I don't want to get dark or anything, but mental health and substance abuse are two really big things that happen in our industry. And I think one of the
three times the rate in the public among lawyers and doctors,
which is terrifying. And I'm very happy to say that I have not struggled with those issues, but I could see how somebody could. Absolutely, because our profession is high stress. You're constantly going. There's a high rate of everything, negative. And so just being able to kind of stop and smell the roses and really enjoy life and unwind is so important.
Let me add one issue is, sorry, I'm looking at my feed here. I think that practicing law hinders me as a business owner, because I has, and I've overcome it, because there's this thing that, if you're a lawyer, you don't ever run a business, or you have some entitlement or something, and you got to get past that. If I was just making widgets or doing something or just running a business, I would just surrender to that and just run a business, if I was running a manufacturing plant. But it's hard to do. So I think it hinders it. And the other thing, being a lawyer is a full-time job. Being a business owner is a full-time job, and marketing your business is a full-time job. So all of these are full-time jobs in and of themselves. So I think that ends up being a hindrance in a way, if you look at it that way. And it's not that I'm feeling sorry for myself or anything like that, but that is what it is. Here's a question. Let's get down to the law. Here's an interesting question. Brennan asks, what's the difference between intent and negligence in a wrongful death case? Do I automatically murder someone with a car? How do you prove the difference? So, Tarun, I've been letting you go first on a number of these. Let me go first, and then I'll throw it to you. So, intent, there's different levels of intents, or the Latin word is mens rea. I mean, you intended to drive the car, but did you intend to shoot someone? No. And I don't do criminal law, but we all got into that and did that in law school. So, all we're doing in a civil case for wrongful death is saying someone was negligent. They didn't do what a normal person should do. Normal people don't drive 100 miles an hour drunk. Normal people don't hire and retain terrible truck drivers who go and injure and kill people. Normal companies don't do that. Responsible companies don't, make dangerous products and let them kill people because they're going to make more money. That's just not what normal people. So the intent level is lower, and it's just negligence. So proving the difference, you're not proving the difference between intent and negligence. Usually in a civil case, intent is more in a criminal case than a civil case. However, in negligence cases, sometimes the negligence is so bad, it rises to the level of being intentional or needlessly indifferent or recklessly indifferent. And that's the subject of something called punitive damages. And when that happens, you've heard of punitive damages awards, but those are only reserved for unusual situations where the conduct rises to that level.
The only thing I'm going to add is what I like to do is in a personal injury case, I on redirect and close, when I get my second crack at the closing, typically the defendant has, the defense attorney has said, hey, look, the defendant is really sorry this happened, yada, yada, yada. And And that's when I kind of bring up this intent versus negligence, in the negligence context, because I say, look, if this was intentional, we would have a very different trial. We'd be having a criminal trial. But this is not. This was not something that was intended to happen. This was negligent, and there's a difference and there's a distinction. So I always make that distinction for the jury and say, if this thing was intentional, we'd be having a completely different trial. And it'd be one where this person's potential liberty would be at stake instead of money damages. That's the only thing I want to say.
You get defense lawyers saying that a lot in their close, that it's not intentional, because it seems like they just walking right into that argument on rebuttal.
Yes, I agree. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but they do it all the time. I've used it every single close, I think, in the last 3 or 4 trials.
Huh.
And this is against seasoned lawyers. But there's also been some other traps that I've laid that they've fallen into as well. I like it when they talk about property damage. One of the best questions that they can ask my client is, and you're not making a claim for property damage, right? And then I jump up, I run to the judge, and I say, they opened the door. They have to admit that they paid for the property damage, because they don't want to tell people that. And that's one of my tricks that I use all the time.
Do you win that? Do you win that?
Mm-hmm.
They always have a case on that?
Yes.
In your pocket, ready to go. Yes, I mean, are you setting them up for that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's great.
And it works every time, because they cannot help it. They cannot help but ask that question.
Right. Okay. So let me go to another question. I don't think so. On the intent issue, I'm thinking, I haven't gotten that as much, but I think those are 2 good points. Those are 2 great tricks. Let me go to another one. Emily asks us, if I were injured in a place of business, let's say I break my leg, what's the first step I need to take to make sure my medical bills are covered if I've never dealt with legal stuff in my life up to this point?
That's a great question. So I think it depends. I think this question is presupposing you're not an employee. So if you're an employee, obviously you have to go through workman's comp.
Let's assume you're not an employee. It's not a comp claim.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to say something that's going to seem like a somewhat self-serving answer, but it's the honest truth. A lot of times with premises or slip and fall cases, the establishment is going to get their insurance company involved, and the insurance company really does not have any interest in helping you out or paying you. They'll string you along and they'll say, hey, send in your bills. Let me take a look at it. Sign these medical authorizations. They want to help you initially because that's to their benefit, because they want to get information out of you and find ways to minimize your claim. But ultimately what they are looking to do is not really pay you much on your claim or anything. And I get calls for people all the time where they say, I was trying to do it myself. I sent in all my stuff and now they're not calling me back. And so my self-serving answer to this is, a lot of times it does make sense to get a good lawyer involved. It's going to be a situation where we know the tricks of the trade. So Gary's very good at this. You're going to reach out to the medical providers and tell them, hey, I'm going to send you a letter of protection, or you're going to send me a lien. Let's do an IOU situation if this person doesn't have health insurance. That way you're not sending them to collections. And then it's going to be something about, really just making sure you find the negligence. If there's no negligence, then we have a different conversation. Assuming there's negligence, really getting you through the process so that you can get those bills paid. So
you're saying call, if they get hurt, they ought to call you. Is that what your answer was? That's self-serving.
It's super self-serving. Not necessarily me, but just any lawyer.
I'm just teasing you.
I know, but it's the honest truth for a slip and fall case, just because a lot of times they really are going to try to pull a fast one on you, and then by the time you realize it, you're in too deep.
It's so true, Tarun. I was just giving you I was just teasing. I tend to be. I think I'm much. Ask my family, the poor people have been hanging with me for so long. It's much less funny than I think. Anyway, but you're exactly right. I mean, they have these stores have systems already. Do you know how hard it is for us to get an incident report? because they say they immediately say it's their mental impressions are in it and it was made for litigation. We have to fight that all the time. These managers are trained like this, especially in the big system state nationwide stores. It's crazy, this stuff. They pull the security tape. If it's favorable to them, then they immediately send it to you. If it's not favorable to them, you got to file a lawsuit to get it. I have had trucking. I had a trucking case that I settled last year where we were in like probably the 10th deposition. And then the other lawyer who I'm in the depot with, and I've had 10 depots and I've litigated this case for 2-3 years with, he mentions to me casually that he was at the scene. The truck crash happened. It's 75 miles from here. He was there that day because the trucking company, and then he litigated the case. So we say, people think, and the reason why Tarun said at the beginning of the answer is this may sound self-serving, but because people can think, oh, call a lawyer first. And people are like, yeah, you're just trying to get business. But the reality is that's true, because you should not be making statements to the insurance company. You should not, and they have systems in place where they try to, and I have a book on this on my website about the tricks that these insurance companies play to try to keep you direct, prevent you from going to a lawyer. Oh, you can't get, chiropractic care for more than 3 weeks and we won't pay you. Oh, you can't get, if you're off work, if you took your vacation pay, we don't have to pay you wage loss damages. There's just I could go on and on. I've done videos on this, it all. So yeah, that's true. So what we need to do, but let me add something to your answer. And then if I interrupted you and cut you off, you add something else. But we're kind of getting to what you're laughing because apparently I did. No, but we're getting toward, we got about 5 minutes left on this deal. I try to keep it at an hour because no one, it's like a college class. No one wants to listen more than that. Use your health insurance, folks. If you get injured, go to the doctor. Don't worry about calling insurance. Take care of your medical care and yourself first. Don't, are you going to make a claim later? Yeah. But, let lawyers like Tarun and me handle that part. Go get medical care. Go to your primary care doctor. Go to an urgent care. Tell them what happened. Don't be afraid. If you're injured in a car wreck, say I'm injured in a car wreck. Don't worry about where the chips are going to land because doctor's not going to take care of that kind of stuff. Get the medical care. Follow the medical care. A lot of people, and I say this too, Tarun, is someone gets in a wreck, their life is interrupted, they're hurt, they're having wage loss damages, they're having the economic hit. You deal with this every day. I see you nodding. They have the economic hit of the medical care, and now they have to go to hire a lawyer. Said no one ever, right? No one wants to have to hire no one wants to have to file a suit or litigate or do a deposition. No one. This shit has already been a pain in the ass to them. So, and so I have people all the time that they've treated for 3 or 4 months. And then they say, listen, I thought this was going to go away. I thought I'd be fine, but this is permanent. I think I need neck surgery now. So then they come to us and stuff. So yes, go to a lawyer, but the other half of the answer is take care of yourself medically and do all this stuff and take pictures at the scene. Anything else we forgot on that question? Anything else we didn't do on that question, sir?
No, that's the main thing. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with a corporation because they are, like you said, they have the systems in place to ensure that they end up with a more favorable result at your expense.
Hey, here's a question. What are your thoughts on the $600 stimulus and the potential 2,000 stimulus increase that McConnell blocked? $600 is nothing. And I'm going to get a little political, but I think it's terrible that he did it. These people are hurting so bad. We're so blessed and lucky to have what we have in life. And I just know my employees. Now, I have employ about 10-ish people, and they're all great. They're all friends. I'm surprised at how much they are thanking me for keeping them employed in all the work we're doing. I get it all the time, and they're very grateful. They're good people. So, and then I'm going to turn it to you, Tarun, because I know I'm talking. But the funniest thing I saw on Facebook was someone said someone is going to raffle off their $600 paycheck to try to get $2,000 their $600 silver. So they said, I'm gonna raffle it off. I'm gonna have 50 entries of $25 a piece. So they're trying to get to the. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I mean, but that's the sad part though, is we have to make jokes of it because it's so terrible. I mean, that's the fact that they had no problems giving the tax break that for the wealthy that didn't need it, but then now we're going to nickel and dime people that are hurting, that weren't able to have their jobs. I mean, I'm just thinking of people that during the closures that couldn't even work, businesses that shut down. I mean, come on. We have to do something.
You know that the top like 0.5% of Americans with the billionaires, with the money that they have made since March, they could pay every American $4,000 right now.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I love picking on Jeff Bezos because because his wife is such a foil to him. She donated a lot of her money that she got when she divorced him, and is giving most of it away. And Bezos is just making money hand over fist because during this period, I mean, everybody's used Amazon. I mean, everybody, and he's making money hand over fist. And I'm just not seeing a Rockefeller or some of the powerhouses of our past who are yes, we're all struggling. I'm doing very well. I'm going to give some of it away. I kind of wish some of those bigger people who are making all that money would be a little more kind and pay it forward a little more.
Let me go back to let me end it with a last question with a question. Do you know Dave Hoffman, my friend Dave Hoffman?
Yes.
Yeah, Dave's a lawyer and a smart lawyer and knows the business. He's on the defense side. He was a guest of mine on the show earlier this year. It was really great to hear his insight to that. But a good guy like Dave, even though he's on the other side, he's the way he talks and what he said, he's always trying to find efficient resolution of these claims, which is great to have someone, because I am too, and I know you are too. So here's Dave's question is, some jurisdictions have mandatory mediation. Do you think mandatory mediation is a good idea? Is it your turn or my turn to go first, Tarun? You go first.
Okay. So what's interesting about this question is I have a case that I filed out in Springfield, and they do have mandatory mediation, and that's the first I've ever had to deal with it, and I think it'll be really useful for that case. I think mandatory mediation would be interesting. I know with my voluntary mediations, I've had not the best of luck, because what I feel like it is the opportunity for the defense to get my client there who's never been through the process, get them rattled, have the mediator working on my client, trying to tell them how bad their case is, and then my clients get scared and wants to accept less money than their case is worth. And so really it's put the onus on me to really prep my client better, to say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get beat up on. This is just, you need to stick to your number if this is your number. I think it would be useful if you prep people correctly, and then you're able to get cases resolved. And both sides comes to the table honestly negotiating in good faith. I've just found in my non-mandatory, my elective mediations, that sometimes the defense doesn't come to the table in good faith.
That is true. That can be frustrating. So I have found mandatory mediation good. Both sides have to be there. Is your case in Springfield, is that state or federal court?
It's state.
Yeah, I know some good mediators. I use Steve Sneed out of Springfield. If you know Steve, he's done a good job for me.
That might be our mediator, or he was one of the three names that somebody threw out. So that might actually be who it is.
I've used Steve. Steve's great. He's a straight shooter. He's actually on the other side of some cases with me, and then he's done some stuff with me. So, but there in the federal court in the Western District of Missouri, they have mandatory mediation so early in the case that I have found that is not successful, because the parties haven't done enough discovery to value the case. So mandatory mediation is good if it's timed right. And most judges, like in federal court in the Eastern District of Missouri, they'll let you set the mediation date far enough along that you've already done the parties' depots, and usually the parties' depots, but before experts, when you maybe done a little medical, some of the medical depots. So I think it's a good idea. I mean, you know, anyway, and it makes the sides talk. The mandatory mediation doesn't mean you have to settle it. And then on your comments on voluntary or mediation, I've had tremendous success this year in voluntary mediations. I don't think I've not settled one. Now, it doesn't always happen in the mediation, but you are right that there is a whole issue of risk tolerance, and a insurance company with 1,000 claims like the one you're litigating has a lot more risk tolerance than a plaintiff with one claim. So you have, and that's what lawyers like you and me strengthen and support our clients and make it an equal playing field. That's what the balance the scales at justice. That can be trite, or you can have the blind lady at justice. In some ways it's trite, but in the trenches litigating every day, it really is true that lawyers like you, Tarun, and I know you well, that you fight for your people. It's passion, it's personal to you, and you're there to equal the scales. And that's just not a saying. It's true. We do it. We work hard to do it. To put the context of our whole conversation today, we work on our trial skills. We do this. We're working hard for our people. We take it. We talk to them. We it's our job to get them a full recovery, not a 50% recovery, but a full recovery. So to the extent mediation can get that done, because there are costs attendant to trial, we could lose cases, that kind of stuff. So sometimes it is a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush sometimes. So
that's right.
Well, I have really enjoyed today's conversation, Tarun. Yeah. So I wanted to just, it's the end of the year. You're the last person on this. I started doing this show with the pandemic hit just for communication, talking to people, to just answer people's questions. I thought we answered some great questions. Questions. So I just want to thank you for your friendship and your good. Lawyers like you make me be proud to be a lawyer, because you're. I remember when we had like our first lunches and you're asking me questions, and look where you are now, man. You're crushing it. You care. You're successful, and you're making the world a better place. So thank you for your friendship. Thank you for being on here, and thanks for your hard work as a good lawyer.
Thanks, Gary. The feeling is mutual. I appreciate you've given me tons of guidance over the years, which I've really appreciated. You are one of the most giving attorneys. I mean, I know. You literally say, if you need something, call me. I have it. I will give it to you. And you are just so sharing, which really helps kind of, make everybody around you better. And then, it helps the people that need to be helped. So I appreciate everything you do. I wish you health and happiness in your 2021 and for you and your family. And I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate everybody listening, and I wish everybody the best.
Thank you. That was very kind of you. So that is true. And I learned from other people that it's better to raise all ships and to help everybody else in our profession. And I learned that from other people, and I'm grateful for that. So for everybody who happened to be listening or who we haven't put to sleep yet, the thing about both Tarun and I is that we will answer your questions for free. So if you want to ask Tarun a question, go to ronaldlawgroup.com, email him. And ask him a question. He will answer any, just as he's just as giving as he is now. I've never asked Tarun anything where he hasn't given it to me. He's emailed me briefs and stuff. You've done the same thing to me, and that's a great thing. If you want to ask me a question, similarly, email me at gary@burgerlaw.com or info@burgerlaw.com. All right, everybody. Happy 2021, Tarun. Happy New Year.
You too. Take care, Gary.